This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Jd Chapman Insurance Agency. Are you an aspiring business owner or entrepreneur looking to be part of New York's multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry? If so, the decisions you make in these early stages are imperative to your future success. And I'll tell you from personal experience that you will face risk on a daily basis. So it's important to have a comprehensive insurance program in place with a trusted, reliable partner. Jd Chapman offers special insurance for cannabis growers, medical and adult use dispensaries, edibles manufacturers, testing labs, ancillary businesses, and more. Available coverage includes general liability, product liability, excess liability, and workers' comp. In this exciting and rapidly growing industry, it's important to have a partner you can trust. Contact Jd Chapman today at 315-986-4062 for all your cannabis insurance needs. Jd Chapman, from seed to sale, they have you covered.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's going on, everybody? Happy 2022. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Happy New Year. It feels like I haven't been here in a year. It's been about 3 weeks. Took a little bit of time off for the holidays. Ended up coming down with COVID, which honestly was not too bad. But excited to be back in studio. We're coming off a couple weeks ago of the Rock City Winter Cannabis Carnival, which was a huge hit, super successful. Really excited for the next one, and I want to thank them for sponsoring the show for the last couple months. But today we're getting down to business with a good buddy of mine. His name is Brian Chapman, and he is with Jd Chapman, Inc., and they are a Western New York-based insurance company who is now specializing in insuring cannabis businesses. Obviously, as you know, New York is legalized. There's rumors that the regulations could be out as early as March or April, which means probably by the end of this year, hopefully, we're going to see licenses and hopefully businesses start popping up.
Yeah, definitely.
And just like any business, you need insurance. So I'm excited to talk to you today. I know that, I'm going to be pursuing a license and I'm going to need insurance for that. I'm already have an insurance policy through you guys for Nestiva, my CBD company. But I'm really interested to see how that all works and how you can get an insurance policy on a cannabis business. But before we start, I want to get a little bit of background on you. You come from a family of insurance experts. So give me a little bit of background on Jd Chapman.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. We've been in business. We've been in business for over 60 years now. It started in 1958 with my grandfather. He started it actually in his house with my grandmother, Doris. And he had bought a book of business from a guy named Henry Kemp that was looking to retire. Ended up doing pretty well with like the farmers in the area. He's from Palmyra, grew up on a farm, kind of had that whole experience. So he knew how to talk the language with those guys. Ended up doing pretty well, and then expanded and started buying little books here and there. And then eventually they got into a space down on Main Street in Macedon, where we're at now, 66 West Main. It was a tiny little building, and then they knocked that down and built something new. I think that was like in the 80s. And then my uncle, Eric Chapman, ended up joining. He did a stint outside of the business for a little while, still insurance related. And then fast forward to about 1990, my father, Bruce, ended up joining the business the year that I was born. Again, he had done a stint at like Kodak and did some other stuff before he got into insurance. And then I think it was like the early 2000s, my cousin Trevor Chapman got involved involved. Again, kind of the unwritten rule with us is like you go and do something else outside of insurance, get a little experience, and then, come into the family business if you choose that.
A Rumspringa.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. So Trevor was out doing some stuff, and then he joined in like the early 2000s. And then we have another gentleman, Kevin Musey, that joined us. I can't remember exactly when he joined, but we bought another company, another insurance agency from Canandaigua in 2005. So we expanded our location. So now we're in Macedon and in Canandaigua. Nice. And then fast forward to about a year ago, I joined the business. And so Trevor and I are technically considered like the third generation. But if you were to ask me in high school, like, hey, man, you're going to join an insurance agency, I'd been like, get out of here. No way. I don't want to sit behind a desk. That sounds so boring. Yeah. But now that I'm in it, it's been nothing but awesome. Yeah.
And you probably never thought you'd be doing insurance for a legal cannabis industry nonetheless.
Not even close. I was actually talking to my dad and some other people. I'm like, did you ever in your lifetime think that you'd be doing this? And they're like, I mean, we hoped, but you never know.
So how did you decide to make the jump into cannabis? What was it that really kind of pushed you in that direction?
That's a good question. So being a new producer, I was looking for that like niche market, something that I kind of knew a little bit about, something I could speak the language to. And I'm looking around and I'm like, everybody's writing the wineries, everyone's writing the breweries, the stuff that's popular. So once I saw that it was going to become legal here in New York, I was like, man, maybe that's something I can get involved with. Yeah. And I was telling you earlier, I looked at with my father potentially what it looked like to get a license, maybe open a dispensary. We went through like having a consulting call and doing all that stuff, and we're like, this takes a lot, man. There's a lot behind this. So then we took a step back and we're like, well, we got the infrastructure set up for insurance. We've been doing it for years. And then it was a matter of just finding markets and stuff. And then before you know it, we're starting a whole arm and putting together, marketing materials. And it's so new that it's very unique that there's any time that there's a brand new niche market that comes into insurance like that. So I figured, hey, why not me? Let's jump on it.
Well, especially like you said, any license that you get, big or small, it's going to have, there's going to be a lot of tape. It could be expensive to size, the scale that you go. It's going to be tax heavy. But what we always talk about on this podcast is the ancillary businesses, people like insurance or accountants or graphic designer, all of these non-plant touching businesses, which us plant touching people all need, but you can get, reap all the benefits of the cannabis industry without the red tape. So I do think, we all know the money that's in a dispensary and how cool it is, but there's also going to be a lot of headache and pushback and bullshit. So I think you guys made a really smart move because, this is arguably going to be the biggest cannabis market in the country, maybe even the world, next to California. And to be on the front line of that in a very necessary, business service sector, which we're all going to need. I just see you guys have a tremendous, successful road ahead of you. So I'm really glad that you came on.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
But, one of the things that's tough that I've noticed, even coming from the CBD industry, is having access to traditional business services and banking is very difficult, right?
Yep.
I had every merchant service shut down. I've had my website shut down. And this is just CBD, a federally legal and state legal product. So
that's crazy.
You are telling me right now that it is possible to insure a plant-touching cannabis business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that was one of my, concerns too, because I wanted to make sure that we could provide a service. I didn't want to get out there and be like, yeah, we can do this. So what I did is I called some of the markets that currently do it and had some conversations with like some of the underwriters and some of the people that have been doing it. The good news is there's actually companies out there that have been writing cannabis related businesses, more so on the medical side, for like 10 plus years. So they've got the experience. Wow. They're established in places like Colorado, out in Massachusetts, the Boston area. So yeah, it's possible to get get insurance for a cannabis business. I actually attended an online event and some people were asking about that, and they basically were saying that the cannabis industry is outgrowing the insurance industry, but there's coverage out there and claims are getting paid. It's out there and happening.
Now, do you have to jump through hoops and bounds to get it say that I have a cultivation license? What kind of hoops and bounds do I have to jump through to get a license? Is it more or a policy? Is it tougher to get a policy as a cannabis business? Is it easy? Just comes with, the fees associated with a high risk business? How does that all work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure a lot of people have that same question. So honestly, what it starts with is finding like an agent, either like myself or somebody that maybe you already do business with, that you can have an honest conversation with. And basically it's knowing, it's the agent knowing what you're doing in your business, right? And having that conversation with the insurance company to make sure that you have, the right coverages in place, basically. So I already ran into it once. You don't have to necessarily go through a bunch of like hoops and bounds. I mean, there's some applications and some things that the agent should walk you through. Obviously, they're going to want to see that you have a license. They're really looking at, how are you going to run your operation? Is it a safe operation? What are the hazards and risks involved? And that goes back to talking to an agent that really knows what you're looking for. Because I had an older agent call me and say, hey, this guy's selling weed, right? He needs coverage. And I'm like, all right, let's have a conversation. So I talked to the guy and he's like, no, actually I'm a hemp farmer. He's like, I'm doing hemp, which is two totally different things. So having somebody that you can talk to that knows what you're doing within the business. What type of extraction methods are you using? Because all that stuff gets relayed to the insurance company. And then the better picture, the better story that they have, the more likely they are to write your business. So yeah, I mean, it's just having as simple as having a conversation. We take care of all the legwork. Nice. They might ask you to provide some stuff, but from what I can tell, it seems to be a fairly easy process.
Now, what types or what kinds of cannabis businesses can be insured?
That's a great question. So anywhere from what you would think of as like a normal dispensary, testing laboratories, places that make edibles, oils, anything basically from seed to sale, even if you're, a plant touching or non-plant touching business. One of the big things that I don't know a lot of people are really thinking about right now is something called like a lesser's risk. So that would be if let's say you own like a big commercial space. Yep. I come to you and I say, hey, Steve, I want a dispensary. I want to rent this space from you. A lot of the times people shy away from that because they say, well, the insurance I have on this building wouldn't allow me to have a dispensary or a grow operation or whatever in this particular area. We have companies that will help those landlords write policies that would cover them to allow someone like yourself to come in and grow.
Really?
Or to a dispensary or whatever it might be. So that's available, which when I was looking at it, I'm like, that could be an issue. People are having a tough time finding a spot.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I saw that I originally, when I started the company, was trying to open a little CBD retail shop. And I had looked at this spot right in the heart of Pittsford. So it's a little art museum now. And I went in there with my paperwork and my everything and said, I'm as legal can be. And the guy, he was a little bit old school. He didn't want to touch it. And I start to look at all these, emerging small businesses and brands who want to, have a dispensary or any sort of business. And while a lot of them will probably own the property, there's going to be a lot of small businesses that don't have the capital to just go buy another piece of property. So they're going to be forced to lease. But if you're, a lot of property owners, not saying all of them, some could be more conservative. They may not know exactly what they're getting into, and they may shy away from it. So now this seems like a vehicle that would maybe kind of mitigate that risk or that fear that they're having. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so new, so I can't tell you what the premiums look like. Yeah. What you would pay now versus if you were to switch to a company that would allow that in there. But yeah, I mean that's something that maybe if you're good friends with the landlord or somebody that really wants to help you out with that business, and they're like, how do I get insurance on this building that I own with this cannabis related business in here? I mean, those are certainly things that are available that maybe not everyone knows. They might be like, oh, well, I just can't do it.
Yeah. So what types of coverage are available? Like, what do you think would be the top, what are the most sought after types of coverage available that these businesses are going to be looking for?
General liability, workers' compensation, if you're, trying to go the delivery route, auto insurance for sure. Those are some of the big ones. I think the biggest one that most people probably need to be aware of when they're going through this is something called completed products and operations. So basically that gives you coverage. Let's say you're an edible manufacturer, right? And something goes wrong, your doses are off. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. Obviously, there's all the safeguards in place. But let's say something happens where your product or any of your completed operations hurts the end user. That I mean, that's got lawsuit written all over it,
No
right?
doubt.
And so if you don't have the right insurance in place that has you protected for the products that you sell, you might be on the hook for all your lawyer fees,
Yep.
for whatever that looks like for you to defend yourself, to make it right for that person. So products and completed operations is definitely a conversation you want to have when you talk to, a cannabis-related agent, because, I mean, we live in a sue-happy society, so...
No doubt, and especially nowadays, you put out gummies or something, and my biggest problem a lot of the times with especially some of these, there was an ER doctor that came out and said, we're seeing an uptick in child-related cannabis, overdoses because they're getting into gummies or whatever, and they're coming into the hospital. That's going to happen. There's going to be times when things, there's lawsuits happening all over the country for missed doses or things that were supposed to be CBD and now with THC, and we're a very we love to litigate in this country, like you said. So that would theoretically, that's going to be huge for some of these mom and pops because something lands in the wrong hand, a kid eats it, even if it's a parent that is irresponsible in the way that they store it. They leave an open pack of gummies, which looks like gummy worms or something. The kid eats it, even if they're fine, they could come back and sue your ass. In a small business that gets sued, you could lose everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just the defense costs alone,
no doubt,
for sure, just to do that. So, I mean, I think it's something that, you need to have an idea. Again, it goes back to is your policy written right? Did your agent tell them what you're doing? And it might look different. I know you had mentioned you're looking for like a micro license, which correct me if I'm wrong, would allow you to grow and sell.
Yeah. It's the only way that you can legally vertically integrate from seed to sale in New York is through this. It's like a craft business license.
Right.
It'll be probably modeled similar after the craft brewer's license, where given a limited amount of square feet, you can do everything from seed to sale. Outside of those size parameters, you can only own. That's why they came out with all of these licenses, because you could own a cultivation and manufacturing, but not a retail, or a manufacturing and a retail, but not a cultivation. So it really prevents these titans,
Right.
big cannabis, from coming in, owning the whole supply chain, really flexing on their economies of scale, and essentially wiping out small mom and pop businesses. So the micro business is something where my heart is really at. I think it's, if you and I both know, you don't need a lot of square footage to make it in cannabis, and I think a lot of people in this industry get caught up in the dollar signs and bigger is better. But, I'm a cultivator, and I'll tell you right now, I cannot fucking imagine cultivating 30,000 square feet of plants or 1,000. I don't even know. I had a hard time doing 50. You know what I'm saying? So it's, I tend to push people in that direction, but I'm guessing that if you're going to have one of these micro business licenses where you're growing and you're manufacturing and you're retail, you're probably going to need a bunch of different policies, general. What would be the ideal package for a small business like a micro business, which probably will be, alongside dispensaries, the most popular license? What would you recommend for an insurance package for somebody seeking out insurance?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because like you said, for somebody like yourself, you're going to have a lot of different exposures, right? You'll be actually growing the plant, you're touching the plant,
Yep.
You're selling it to the end user. So having that discussion to make sure you're covered. Now, most of the time, these insurance policies are written with all that coverage on maybe one form. Not to get too technical with you, there's certain things called package policies where they kind of piece out the different coverages that you need, and then there's other things called business owners policies where they're a little bit more comprehensive and cover you on maybe more items. But again, it goes back to having that conversation, because if someone is just strictly growing, maybe that they only need insurance for that crop.
Yep.
But most of the time, all the policies include your general liability, your products and completed operation, and then once you separate out, your auto policy is a different policy, and then your workers' comp policy, like that. But the companies that I've been talking to, kind of give us a breakdown on how they write their things, and it's not a one size fits all policy.
No.
You can't say, hey, I'm a tester and you can't have the same coverage as if, the license you're going after. So
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there's not going to be cookie cutter policies.
no, yeah, you can't go to Geico, right?
No,
you
you
can't be
can't.
like Progressive. I need a cannabis insurance, but
Well, like if you have a cultivation license or something, and there's going to be a difference in coverage of somebody that's running a 5,000 square foot operation compared to a 30 or 50,000 square foot operation, I'm assuming, right?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, they're going to have more equipment in there.
Yeah.
They're going to have more plants. They're going to probably maybe have more people working. So you want to make sure that you have the right coverage, what they would consider contents or your stuff, everything inside your business. The bigger you are, the more machines you have. Yep. Maybe they have stuff called equipment breakdown. That's kind of broad coverage. So maybe you've got they have those trimming machines or whatever else that you might use. You want to make sure that you're covered for that. Yep. God forbid your place burns. You just spent all this money to get a license. You spent all this money to get all your stuff in there, and now you're like, well, I'm dead in the water. What do I do?
Yeah. Right. Well, what if, I always thought as a cultivator is like, obviously as an indoor cultivator at scale, you're using a lot of power. And, if you're using, I grow on rock wool, which compared to soil, there's not that much of a buffer. So if something goes wrong, can go wrong fast. Right. If I have the right insurance policy and, we have a storm and my electricity kicks off and my pumps fail, my lights fail, my plants die, is that something that could be covered? How would that work?
That's actually a really good question. I to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure on what that would look like. I would again, that goes back to having an agent that's going to call that in and say, hey, look, my insured Steve had this issue. What does that look like? Yep. Or even having that conversation with somebody before they write the policy. But to take that scenario and put it into a different business, let's say you had like a pizza shop, right? And all your stuff, or a restaurant, all your food and everything that you have in your freezers, you lose power and that all goes bad. There is coverage for something like that. So yeah, in the cannabis industry, that's a good question. I would imagine that they've seen that before, but I'd have to find out. Yeah,
because there's like crop insurance for regular agricultural products, right? What does that look like?
Totally, yeah, and that's kind of what they would do for the hemp. And I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert in crop insurance by any means, but it would have to. You'd have to look at the policy and what those covered losses are. Whether that would be, I don't know, like the major tornado that just ripped through the Midwest. If that would be covered, drought, or what that looks like and how that's covered. I know that there's crop insurance available. Nitty gritty wise, I'd have to do a little bit of digging on that end.
Well, it's so different too because in a small square footage, in a 10 light room, you could have $100,000 for the plants, which is like 50 acres of corn, pretty much.
Right, exactly.
So it'd be curious to see if they would, I hope that farmer, especially these small cultivators where their whole livelihoods are depending on this crop, not only making it to the end, but being high quality. And if you lose a crop, even if you had mold or something, you could lose your business. So,
absolutely.
So to have access to some, even if it didn't cover everything, for these businesses to have a little bit of a shield or a backup plan to cover their ass is really, because the short of it is there's going to be a lot of businesses that try and fail. Starting of any sort of business in any industry is very fucking hard. Entrepreneurship is tough. Starting in this industry, although the money's there, the amount of red tape and the amount of bullcrap that you have to face and the taxes, it's going to be very difficult to make it legitimately. Yeah. Couple that with all the risk and all the stuff, it's going to be very tough, but it's exciting to hear that businesses like yours are actually being proactive about this, because quite frankly, I don't know of any other insurance companies, at least in New York, that are really looking at this seriously. So I would imagine that you guys are going to have a bright future ahead of you in cannabis.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's certainly the goal. And then, thinking about it, just like probably everything else with the banking laws and stuff, as soon as this becomes federally legal, it's going to open up the floodgates for so many things. It's going to make it's going to make insurance policies maybe a little bit more affordable. They can go to a more of admitted market versus a non-admitted market, which everything now in cannabis is kind of written on that non-admitted market side, basically meaning that they're not a non-admitted market writes more of your specialty insurances, like high risk people that maybe have massive crane operations or something like that doesn't fit in like a normal market. That cannabis is in there, but on all these things that I've been reading and talking to the people out in Colorado, as soon as that becomes legal, people can bank and so on and so forth. It'll just open up the floodgates and make it a little easier. Well, a lot easier, hopefully, for everyone.
You got to think that this is still very much an all cash business. You see, all these states, another $1 billion, another record, millions and millions of dollars happening every single month, right? Pretty much all cash.
Yeah, yeah.
And what we know about all cash businesses is you're not always seeing the entire pie, right?
No.
So it's like you see all these numbers coming out of Colorado and California and Illinois, and it's like, wow, those are really impressive. But I would bet my life that that's only a small piece of the pie. The day that what is the reality of the money that's being made? Is it actually $2 billion instead of $3 billion? Because Cash businesses, you ain't reporting all of it. That's just the reality of the situation. And with this industry making it very difficult to bank and have access to financial services, it is my opinion that we're only seeing a small piece of the reality of the, what's really coming in this industry. But my point is that the day that you can actually walk into a dispensary and buy with a credit card weed, or online and delivery, and eventually Amazon's going to be in on all those businesses. It's going to change the game
big time.
I'm not really interested in being the biggest or the gnarliest. Just kind of want my little small piece of the pie. But there's going to be huge companies out there already that are doing multiple 100,000 square foot facilities that are going to be doing millions and millions of dollars a month, which who probably already are. The second you can swipe that credit card and go get a loan for your cannabis business or something like that, the game is going to change and it's going to blow up.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been just trying to network and meet guys like yourself and other people that are looking at this industry. I'm like calling around to all the mortgage brokers and people I know. I'm like, so does your bank consider? And they're all, what is FDIC insured? So they're like, nah, we can't touch it. One of my father's friends actually works for a company out in New Jersey that is open to having discussion about, banking through a cannabis industry, whatever that looks like. But it's like finding a needle in a haystack, man. You can't.
Yeah. And especially, the thing is, the banks are probably dying to get into it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, I do know that a lot of like the state and based credit unions and the smaller banks have a little bit of an easier time entering, because when you're a huge national or international bank, your assets are spread across everywhere. And the second, you could be you could be operating compliantly in a state that's legal, but the second that money goes over state lines, it essentially becomes federal drug trafficking and money laundering. So these big banks won't touch it. But I do know of, some small credit unions, even in the area, who are very cannabis friendly. Who maybe only be able even just to provide checking accounts and deposit accounts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's all most people are asking for is just, where can I put this wad of money that I'm, getting on a daily basis? So, to be able to have access to financial services, have access to insurance services, it's starting to feel like a real legitimate industry.
Absolutely. And that does nothing but good for those people, because think about it. You read the news about when it was going legal in Colorado, and when I actually lived out there when it started to go legal, and every other day on the news, it was like some dispensary was targeted because they knew they had a bunch of cash on hand. Yeah. So, it becomes to insurance speak, a liability issue almost. You've got that you're a prime target for this. So that would be a huge help. Huge help.
Yeah, having thousands and thousands of dollars in cash on hand, fucking, products. My buddy who owns Triclomes over on Dewey Ave, for like the first month he was in business, somebody threw a brick through his window. And I was hate to break it to you, but that's not going to be the first time that happens. So now they got bulletproof glass all over the place. They have a bank safe in the back. It's like you really have to fortify these businesses until we have safe place to put the cash.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, so funny story, I ran into a buddy of mine out in Massachusetts that I went and played high school lacrosse with. Hadn't seen him in years, ran into him at a brewery, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, what's up? He was in the Marines and in the Army. He's like, actually, I run security for a dispensary out here in Massachusetts. Cool. So I'm like, do I have questions for you?
Oh, yeah.
And and all the ones that, you've been to, it's super controlled from front to back when you're coming in, coming out, and checking in and checking out, and so on. But it's the after hour stuff. And honestly, that plays back into insurance, where if you can provide, or you can show that you have a safe operation, you have cameras, maybe a night security team that comes around or whatever. Those are only things that would be, positive towards a company saying, yes, we'd like to provide you a policy.
Yeah. So if you're listening, future cultivators and business owners, fortify your businesses. It'll be better for insurance. One of the last things I want to talk about, cannabis is a high-risk business, kind of like the porn industry, guns, gambling, all that. And with high-risk businesses come enhanced rates. I saw that in the cannabis, in the CBD space. And I don't know, what does it mean? What does pricing and rates look like for a cannabis business compared to a non-cannabis business?
Yeah, that's a great question. That kind of goes back to that admitted versus non-admitted market. So right now, all the carriers that we represent that we've talked to are in that non-admitted market. So unfortunately, that does play into a little bit higher of premiums on a yearly basis. It's tough because we haven't obviously physically written any policies yet because licenses aren't there, and we just we haven't done it. But I had the same question. What does this look like? So I called some of the other agencies that do this in Colorado and Massachusetts and so on. And then I called the companies that are providing these policies. What I got, and don't quote me on this, but a very broad range if you're looking for, and again, it really depends on what you're doing, anywhere from that $2,500 to maybe $5,000 minimum to start for just your like general liability policy. So that wouldn't cover all the ins and outs of what you might need, your other certain things, and it's tough to really put a number on it right now. That's kind of the number I've been hearing. But again, as soon as it goes federally legal and these admitted markets are like, we want in, that's only going to do so much better for the insured, for the people actually buying the policy.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're in a good position because there's states like California who've been dealing with this with no ability to get insurance, no ability to have banking, still, federal raids and all that shit. We're really coming in at a sweet time where it's pre-federal legalization so we can build state-based infrastructure so we can compete in the federal market. And my guess is we're probably only a few years away from federal legalization. Yeah. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to be the president that do it. He's kind of a dinosaur on drug policy and cannabis, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if we are able to set up and we get a couple years under our belt to really establish infrastructure and get these businesses going, eat crow a little bit when it comes to high rates and 280E when it comes to taxes, when those floodgates come down and it's federally legal and all this kind of stuff goes away, your bottom line is going to increase drastically. So now it's about, there's California people who've been out holding on for dear life for 10 years, especially if California butchered their industry. So now if you can get in, hang on, make your money, but hopefully break even at the very least, because ultimately, if you're able to survive towards a post, federal legalization world, your bottom line is going to increase drastically, and your life is going to become a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. You make a good point, and I think, like you said, New York's kind of a unique spot, right? We can look and be like, okay, well, what worked here? What didn't work here? What should we do? How if we were smart, we would do that.
Yep.
As a state. So yeah, it'll be interesting, man. I've been following right along, trying to figure out when stuff's going on, trying to talk to the right people. So, but yeah, definitely a unique spot.
Yeah, and I think that you're in a really good position of, you're young. This is definitely more of a young and progressive thing, just because of the stigma associated with cannabis and the older crowd. Probably a lot of more, older, more not seasoned, but people who've been in insurance for a long time may look at cannabis and be like, I ain't fucking touching it.
Exactly.
So to come in now, young, being on top of the industry, it's really, I do think you're set up for tremendous success, and I'm really excited for it. And I'm excited. Hopefully you're going to write my policy in the future. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, it's still a lot of the older generations kind of like, this isn't my thing. So, I mean, I'm not an expert by any means in cannabis or growing or anything like that, but I think I have enough life experience just being around it, watching some people that I know grow in Colorado and so on and so forth, listening to your podcast, man. I can't tell you how much stuff I've picked up just listening through that. Really helps me be a little bit more educated when I go to talk to folks like you and everybody else out in the market. Yeah, I'm
glad to hear that. That's, just trying to that's the key to breaking down walls, man, is just educate. Because at the end of the day, I think, I've seen it when I first started advocacy. I'm not as much in the Albany scene anymore and doing a lot of that, but first seeing, like, if you just go into, a lot of people, when they hear activists, they hear, chanting and fucking picketing and yelling and blah, blah. But if you just go in and talk to these legislators and provide facts and have a very matter-of-fact conversation and educate, you wouldn't believe how easy it was to get some of these people to say, wow, you're right, I'm on board, literally. So it really is, I've always been a big proponent of education. That's the key to breaking down walls. It's the key to destigmatizing. So yeah, I'm glad you learned a little something on the podcast.
Yeah.
So we aim to please around here.
Yeah, oh, you're doing a good job, man.
Thank you very much.
I've talked to a few of my buddies that still live out in Colorado and stuff, and I've turned them onto your podcast, and they're like, yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
This is cool.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and lots of good content coming in 2022.
Cool.
We're really going to ramp up the content, and really, we want to be a good source of education and, be a platform for experts like you. So I do appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise, and Before we wrap up, is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you want to hit home that maybe we didn't touch on, or even better, where can people find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you're always welcome. COVID's a little tough, but you're always welcome to walk into our business, 66 West Main, and in Canandaigua as well. Probably the best way to get a hold of me is the business line 315-986-4062. I'm on my email constantly. That's Brian, Brian at jdchapmaninc.com.
That's true. You are fast about returning those emails. Dude, I feel bad sometimes. 24 hours will go by and like 2 minutes later I get a response and I don't respond back for like 24 hours. So this man is he's very responsive on his emails, and I can tell you that from firsthand experience. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, no, I think we covered a lot of good stuff. I mean, people are probably going to have questions. I'm available. I don't need to write your policy. I just want to be, like you said, an educational tool for people. The conversation can start now. It doesn't have to wait until you get a license. So we're available. Just make sure that whoever you talk to, whether it's me or somebody else, really understands what you're doing. I can't hammer that home enough.
Yeah, and be transparent.
Yes, yeah. Don't write. You don't need to hide. You don't need to. Right. There's nothing to hide. It's a legal. It's a legal business now. It's not like you're out there, manufacturing meth or something crazy, right? It's just don't lie. That's a good point.
Can you insure a meth factory? Is the question. That's probably a not admit in business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you could probably insure the business that's a front for that. But
yeah, exactly.
I don't advocate that, but we'll see.
One last thing that I'm thinking about it, there are a lot of businesses out there, including mine, that are really trying to get as prepared as we can for the real McCoy, and that's licensure. Is it possible to get a policy written before you have a license, or is it possible to get a policy now and adapt it to cannabis? How would that work right now for businesses who are trying to get prepared?
That's a great question. We can't, I don't think, what they call bind, or we can't. I can get you a quote, basically, is what it breaks down to. So we can give you an idea of what it would look like. I think most of the places in their applications are going to ask you for that license number or whatever it is. But you can come to us and get an idea of what that looks like. And then as your businesses change, or you decide you're not going to do something or do something, we can change that. So yes, you can get an idea of numbers. You just can't technically institute that policy until you have that license. But Yeah,
I guess what I'm thinking is, like, when it comes to license applications for some of these small businesses, even if they don't have a policy in place, if there's some sort of documentation that says, hey, we've been proactive, here's the policy that we're going to get once we have a license, just so the state says, oh, wow, this is a real business. They have a real entity. They have employees, and they have an insurance policy that's ready to go upon licensure. My guess is that would be definitely very beneficial towards businesses looking for a license.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Do you think that they'll probably require that in the licensure language? But again, that's not really my area. I don't know.
I would assume so. It's just going to be one of those things. It's like, it's kind of a chicken or an egg. You require insurance, but insurance requires the licensure. So now it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah.
But yeah, long story short, people, get prepared.
Yep.
If you are serious about operating a legal recreational or adult use cannabis business, start preparing. We've talked about real estate on here. We've talked about taxes on here. We've talked about all these things to get you as close to compliant and close to ready. So when that time comes, you can have a much easier road to licensure. And one of those things that you got to do is be on top of your insurance, because it's going to benefit you now, and it's definitely going to benefit you later. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I'll include your contact information and number and business address in the podcast show notes, so people can reach out to you.
Perfect.
If you can't get a hold of him, reach out to me. I'll send you his way, and we'll make it happen.
Awesome. Sounds good.
We're all about the small business around here.
Absolutely, man. That's what makes the world go around.
Yes, sir. Well, guys, this has been another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. I'm here with my good buddy, Brian Chapman from Jd Chapman. They are a Western New York-based insurance company who is now specializing in insuring cannabis businesses. Get a hold of them because you're going to need them. We'll see you next week. Thanks again. Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabis. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.